Hey everybody, welcome back to the dirty chainsaw bench. This is something I keep saying I'm going to clean it and I just keep going. Only you can stop a dirty bench, friends. I'm definitely, after this is done, I got to do a full cleanup. Today's video, I'm just going to jump in here. I'm going to show you guys a couple things that go wrong with, well, your average saw. I tend to spend most of my time dealing with saws that are used by professionals and building saws for professionals, and sometimes I forget that most people that use saws are not professionals. So today's video, I have this Craftsman 42cc. This is your common saw. Everybody's got one of these. There's been tens of millions of these things made, and they're definitely common. Now, this, like most homeowner saws, or maybe this saw's been at the lake or wherever, it spends most of its life sitting, and that kills saws in itself because of the types of carburetors they have. Now, in today's video, I just want to go over simply a few little issues that you tend to run into with saws that have been sitting. Maybe you have one and maybe this will help you out. Okay? The number one thing is, okay, your saw's been sitting for years sometimes. As this saw's probably been sitting for, I don't know, 5-10 years. I can just tell by the smell of it, the smell of the gas. The rest of the saw is like shiny. So this saw has very, very little use. Like, it's very typical of how a homeowner saw would be. So, number one thing, if you're not going to run your saw, I recommend Aspen fuel. Aspen fuel is the canned fuel you can buy at your hardware store. Dealerships have it. Buy that stuff and run that stuff because it has a way, way longer shelf life. The problem is, if you put standard gasoline in this saw, most gasoline has ethanol in it. And what happens is ethanol kills the shelf life of the fuel. And you'll put your fuel in here and it'll be fresh. You'll cut 2 branches in spring. You'll put your saw on the shelf. You'll think, geez, that was fun. I should use that saw more often. And you think, I'm going to use that saw again this year. And next thing you know, it's 2-3 years later. And you're like, hey, I got some sawing to do. I better fire up my chainsaw. You pull your saw down off the shelf, and what happens? It won't start. And you think, wait a minute, it ran last time I used it. That's every time I buy a saw that's been sitting, someone says 90% of the time, it ran good last time I used it. When is the last time you used it? Oh, about 10 years ago. A lot can go wrong in 10 years. So, number one, fuel. If you're not going to use it, drain the fuel tank, start the saw up, and let it idle until it's out of fuel. If you do that, you'll probably never have an issue. Or, number two, use Aspen fuel. And I'm not any way connected with Aspen. I don't use that fuel, but if I was only the occasional user. Another thing I could say, if you buy good oil, like Opti 2, I've been using this stuff for years. This stuff has a stabilizer in it. I've had saws with the same fuel in them for 2 or 3 years, and it still smells potent, and they still run. So that's your third option. Okay, the reason why this saw's here is, of course, it will not start. Fuel lines. These saws take these Tygon fuel lines. These get really dry and really brittle if you don't, if you let them sit with fuel in them. This saw has no fuel lines left on it. The only thing that's left is this one. And this comes off of the purge bulb. Okay, you can hear it. Now, if the purge bulb was cracked, I'd have to replace that. Those dry out. But again, this comes off of the carburetor and into the purge valve. Okay, this is the only one left. The other one is completely missing, and there's one that comes off of here. I'm just sucking on it to make sure it's not plugged. I think this is the fuel inlet. I'm not sure, friends. I don't have a diagram on how any of these parts go. But I'm pretty sure this is the fuel inlet, and I'm pretty sure that this goes straight into the tank, and then a fuel line goes on there. Not only was there no filter, there's no fuel filter in the tank, there was no fuel line. It was just completely, and when I pulled it out, it crumbled, okay? So that's the second thing. If you let fuel sit in there, expect your lines to be no good. Now, let's get into the carburetor. This is your standard 2-stroke multi-positional carburetor. These have carbs like this because they run upside down and sideways. Okay, this is a Walbro. You'll see a lot of these on saws. There's one screw in the center. When you take that off, there's a diaphragm in there. Now, this one, surprisingly, doesn't look too bad. It is stiff. I'll show you guys right here. It is stiff, but I bet you it'd still be pretty good. Now, I have these aplenty. This is a Walbro WT carb. You will find these on, it's a WT 239 or 391. You will find these on a lot of steels. So I have carb kits for these. Now, couple things before we even look inside the carb. This is your impulse circuit, and all this is, there's a little hole, and I'll show you guys this. There's a little hole right here, okay? Hopefully you guys can see this. There you go, right there. Okay? What that hole does, when you pull the saw over, the bottom end, everything underneath the piston, is either sucking or blowing, okay? On the way up, it's sucking, and on the way down, it's pushing, okay? What that does is, it pushes or sucks on the carburetor, and it allows these little flaps here, right here, to open and close, okay? They go. So if these are curled up, which they often are, or if they're stuck to the body of the carburetor, okay, and if you see, they just cover, those little flaps cover a hole here. Sorry, friends, right here. Hole here and a hole there, okay? So, I'm going to replace that. And now, on the other side, right here, okay, you got 3 screws. I don't know how easily this is going to come apart because this carburetor has probably never been opened. I will do this off camera. Okay, and here's the other side of that cover. Look at this. You hear that? That should be pliable rubber. It is crinkly and stiff and misshapen. This is a pump, okay? And it opens and closes. Let's see if we can get this off. And again, when you let something sit for too long, it sticks to the carburetor. Okay, there's the other side of that. There's that little tab on there. And what that does is, right here, opens and closes it, okay? Now, you may be inclined to take these Welsh plugs out and clean under there. I wouldn't do that unless you think you have a carburetor issue. Now, another thing you want to check, which I was kind of alluding to earlier, check that this gasket is not ripped. It's a little bit ripped here. I'm not worried about that part. Around here, you want to make sure that that's going to seal, okay? Now, I think this one's okay. If that's not sealed, you won't have a fuel pump and your saw won't start. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to install a new carb kit in this thing, and I'm going to replumb it and see if it runs. Oh, and the last thing, you guys see? That's the inlet screen for the fuel that's coming into it. See all that fine dust? That is not a byproduct of cutting wood. You know what that is? That's a byproduct of having a dull chain. That's not a shot at anybody. I just pulled that right out of there because I have a new screen. Underneath there is the main jet for the carburetor, okay? Or there's an orifice in there. Make sure it's not clogged, but again, make sure that that's not plugged, okay? And it might be. So we'll have to blow all that out. Low pressure, don't use high pressure on these. But again, if you run a dull chain, and there's so many chain sharpening videos. I have a couple. Buck and Billy Ray Smith, my buddy, has the best ones, I think. That's where I learned how to sharpen. Learn how to sharpen. Those fines are usually from running a dull chain, and they get sucked into the carb, and then again, you don't have a saw that runs. So, chainsaws are definitely something that you need to learn how to use, but you can get there. Okay, let's plop a carb kit in this thing, and then I'll replumb it, and we'll see if we can get it started. And again, sorry for the mess, but this is a homeowner's saw, and it's kind of a homeowner's bench today, isn't it? Okay, you see, you buy a carb kit, you get all that kind of fun stuff with it. Let's take this. Okay, new inlet screen. Just going to push that in there oh so carefully. And believe it or not, that just sits in there. There you go. Here's your new inlet screen. There's a little piece of schmutz in there. I'll get rid of that. Okay, right there. Now let's find a new carb gasket. Right here. Line it up. Line it up till you can see. See, those flaps cover very nicely. Now, if you're not going to use ethanol fuel, you can use this one, which is basically what I've already seen in there, the blue one. That we just pulled out. We're going to use this one because this saw will probably be eating a steady diet of ethanol fuel. Okay, now find the gasket that suits your needs, and by suits I mean has the right holes in it. Okay, just going to line it up here. Again, this side is diaphragm on the body of the saw, gasket, cover. Okay. Where's your cover? Right here. And again, this carb is ridiculously clean. This isn't even the worst carb I've had on my bench this week, and that's no joke. Okay, it all goes back together nicely. Take your screw. If you're worried about a really dirty carb, pull your jets out. We're not going to cover that in this video though, because that's simple enough. And then we'd have to do a whole separate tuning video. This has a regulator or a, whatever you want to call it, a governor on it so that you can't turn it out. I don't want to remove that because this is not my saw. And those are there for a reason. So knuckleheads like me can't tune their carb properly. Okay, I pulled the needle out. There's your needle. I don't know if this will, there we go. It's got a little wear on the end. So again, compare your parts. I'm going to use the same metering lever right here. Okay. And the same spring. Sometimes I find on these carb kits the springs are wrong, so if you're going to lose something, don't lose the spring. Lose something that you don't need. These springs, they got to be just right. We dealt with that in the last video, the pop-off pressure, and I'm going to try and keep this video as short and sweet and simple. So the average person, man, woman, or child can get their chainsaw running. And then, perhaps, if you enjoy it, you'll hang around here and you'll learn other things. And maybe you'll find a video on sharpening. You'll get that part done. Running a saw with a sharp chain is just a glorious thing. You don't need one of these. I just have one of these because, well, I'm doing this all the time. All that does is set your metering lever. You can buy these things for like $5 online. You just line it up. Look, WT. We know this is WT carb. Okay. There you go. Okay, and it's just touching. Now we grab one of these. Right here. This side is gasket. Then diaphragm. And then cover. Right there. Put this on. Right here. Okay. I'm going to do the 4 screws. Then I'm going to run new fuel lines. I will do that off camera because I need to look up which way they go. I'll show you guys when they're complete. I've worked on these before. I think this is like a Poulin. It's just rebranded to be a Craftsman, but I can't remember, friends. So I'll look online and see what I can find. The internet is a glorious thing. You just got to find the things that you're looking for. Somebody else has experienced it. You just got to find it, and the information is there if you look for it. Okay, there's your carb kit. Okay, and after you get your fuel lines run, these have, the one on the right side goes to the carburetor. That's the one that has the fuel filter. And then there's another hole on the left side that goes into the fuel bulb, the purge valve, the purge bulb, whatever you want to call it, and then back into the other side of the carburetor. Okay, so the one on the right side is the fuel inlet, and the one on the left side is for your purge valve. Again, purge it 5 or 6 times till you see fuel in the purge bulb right there. See, it's full of fuel. Pull the choke and fire this thing up. Now I've already had this running, friends. I cheated. And that's it. Total cost for this, well, total cost for this project was about 20 Canadian dollars. Fuel filter, fuel line, and a carb kit. Just like that, you can fix your old chainsaw that's been laying around, especially if you left fuel in it. Anyhow, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. Later.